You know what's funny about relationships? How quickly someone can flip the script and make you look like the crazy one. I'm Piper. I'm 29, and I just went through the most insane breakup of my life. Not because of what I did, because of how he reacted to what any normal person would consider a reasonable request for space. Anyway, make sure to hit that like button if you enjoy hearing about this mess, and don't forget to subscribe. If you're new here, trust me, you're going to want to hear how this plays out. So I'd been with Trip for 4 years. 4 whole years of my life. And yeah, we had our good moments, but lately I'd been feeling suffocated. He's one of those guys who needs to know everything, where I'm going, who I'm with, what time I'll be home. Not in a sweet, caring way either. More like he was keeping tabs on me. I work in an office downtown, and he'd text me throughout the day asking how my meetings went, if I grabbed lunch with anyone, just constant check-ins that felt more like surveillance than love. Meanwhile, I'm expected to tell him every detail of my day while he barely shares anything about his work-from-home setup. Double standard much. When I'd ask him about his day, it was always fine or busy with projects. But God forbid I didn't give him a play-by-play of my entire afternoon. The thing is, I'd started having these amazing conversations with Reed from work. He actually listened to me, When I'd complain about feeling trapped in my relationship, he'd validate my feelings instead of making me feel guilty for having them. Reed understood that I was in my prime and shouldn't be tied down by someone who wanted to control my every move. He'd take me to lunch, and we'd talk for hours about life dreams, what we really wanted. It felt like breathing fresh air after being underwater. I wasn't doing anything wrong. We were just friends. But try explaining that to Trip, who'd get this weird look on his face whenever Reed's name came up. He'd ask these loaded questions like, how was lunch with Reed? In this tone that made it sound dirty somehow. It was exhausting being with someone so insecure and possessive. After months of feeling like I couldn't breathe in my own relationship, I finally worked up the courage to have the conversation. I'd been staying at my friend Steven's place more often just to get some space to think. Steven's been my friend since college, and he completely understood what I was going through. He'd seen how Trip would call and text constantly when I was out, how he'd want to know every detail of where I'd been. So 2 nights ago, I sat Trip down on our couch. Well, his couch technically, since everything was in his name. And I gave him the most mature, thoughtful speech about needing space to grow as a person. I'd been going to therapy, working on myself, and I realized I needed time to figure out who I was outside of this relationship. I told him I thought we should be friends for a while, give each other room to breathe. I expected him to fight for me, to ask what he could do differently to show me he cared enough to try. Instead, he just sat there with this blank expression and said, okay, if that's what you want. That should have been my first red flag. I mean, what kind of person just accepts their girlfriend of 4 years walking away without even trying to work things out? It proved everything Reed had been saying about him, that he was emotionally unavailable and didn't really value what we had. A man who truly loved me would have fought harder. I packed some clothes and moved in with Steven, temporarily figuring I'd give us both a few weeks to cool off, and then we could figure out how to navigate this new dynamic. I wasn't ending things permanently. I just needed space to explore who I was becoming. Reed had been so supportive through this whole process, and I was finally ready to see where that connection might lead. The first night at Steven's, I felt this incredible sense of freedom. Like I could finally breathe again. I didn't have to account for my time or explain my choices to anyone. I could stay out late, have drinks with Reed after work, live my life without someone monitoring my every move. But then the text started. First, it was about the car. Some nonsense about insurance complications and how he needed it back because I wasn't living there anymore. I'd been driving that car for 2 years. It was basically mine. Sure, his name was on the paperwork, but he bought it for me when my old one died. He works from home and barely uses it anyway. It felt petty and vindictive, like he was trying to punish me for having the courage to speak my truth. Then I tried to log into Netflix that evening, and the password didn't work. Same with Spotify. By the next morning, I got an email saying our meal delivery service had been canceled. He was systematically cutting me off from everything like some kind of controlling psychopath. The audacity of it all was breathtaking. I'd asked for space, not for him to blow up our entire life together. These were shared accounts things we both used and enjoyed. Just because I needed some time to figure things out didn't mean he should destroy everything we'd built together. I called Stephen furious. "Can you believe this? He's acting like a child." Stephen tried to play devil's advocate, which was annoying. "I mean, Piper, you did break up with him. Maybe he's just protecting himself." We didn't break up," I snapped. "I asked for space. There's a difference." But deep down, I was starting to realize that Tripp wasn't playing by the rules I'd expected. In my mind, asking for space meant maintaining our connection while I figured things out. I thought he'd respect what we had enough to keep things stable while I explored my options. Instead, he was acting like some scorned ex-boyfriend trying to make my life as difficult as possible. Reed was incredible through all of this. When I told him what Tripp was doing, he was outraged on my behalf. "He's trying to control you even after you left," he said, shaking his head. "This is exactly what I was worried about. He can't handle you being independent." That's when I knew I had to confront Tripp directly. This passive-aggressive nonsense had to stop. I showed up at his apartment, our apartment really since I'd lived there for 2 years, ready to have an adult conversation about how to handle this transition. Instead, he opened the door like he was expecting me, which was weird. What the hell is your problem?" I started because someone needed to address the elephant in the room. He just leaned against the doorframe with this smug expression. "I'm not sure what you mean, Piper." The gaslighting was immediate. "My Spotify logged me out mid-song. Netflix won't work and you're demanding the car back. What are you doing?" I'm doing what you asked," he said like he was talking to a child. "You said you wanted space, that you wanted to be friends. Friends don't share streaming accounts or cars." The logic was so twisted it made my head spin. "I said I needed space, not that you should destroy our entire life together. I need that car for work. I understand it's inconvenient, but the car is my property. I can't have someone who doesn't live here driving it. It's an insurance liability." Insurance liability. He was talking about me like I was some stranger off the street instead of the woman he'd supposedly loved for 4 years. The coldness in his voice was chilling. "This is ridiculous," I told him. "This isn't how you treat someone you care about. This is petty and vindictive." That's when I made the mistake of mentioning Reed. "My God, Reed was right about you." The name just slipped out, but I could see Tripp's expression shift. He'd always been jealous of my friendship with Reed, and now he was probably building some whole narrative in his head about what that meant. "Who's Reed, Piper, Yinte?" he asked, and his voice was too quiet. "He's just a friend from work. He's been supportive through all of this." "Supportive through what, your decision to end our relationship?" "You're twisting my words. I needed a break, some space to figure things out, and you go nuclear. You're trying to control me just like he said you would." The conversation devolved from there. Tripp became more and more unreasonable, demanding I return his car keys like I was some kind of thief. When I refused, I would have because seriously, I needed transportation to get to work. He did something I never could have predicted. He pulled out his phone and started tapping on it. Suddenly, I could hear his car alarm going off down the street. The sound was piercing, embarrassing, drawing attention from everyone walking by. "What did you do?" I demanded. "The car is locked and the alarm is on. It'll continue until I turn it off. I can also report it stolen since it's in my name." The threat was clear. He was willing to humiliate me publicly and potentially get me arrested just to prove a point. This was the man I'd spent 4 years of my life with, showing his true colors the moment I tried to assert some independence. I was shaking with rage, but I didn't have a choice. I dug the keys out of my purse and slammed them into his palm. The second I did, the alarm stopped, leaving this awful silence between us. "You have 48 hours to get your things," he said like he was evicting a tenant. "After that, I'm changing the locks." I walked away from that apartment knowing our relationship was truly over. Not because of anything I'd done, but because Tripp had revealed himself to be exactly the controlling, vindictive person Reed had warned me about. A man who truly loved me would never have treated me like that, would never have tried to leave me stranded without transportation or cut me off from basic services we'd shared. But I wasn't going to let him win that easily. The 48-hour deadline came and went. I was busy with work and dealing with the logistics of suddenly not having a car, so I didn't have time to coordinate getting my stuff. Besides, most of it was just clothes and personal items. Nothing I couldn't replace. I figured he was bluffing about the locks anyway. He wasn't. When I finally made it over there, 3 days later, my key didn't work. I stood there jiggling the handle like an idiot, unable to believe he'd actually followed through on such a petty threat. My clothes, my books, my grandmother's jewelry, everything was locked inside, and he was holding it hostage. That's when I decided to fight back. I knew where he worked, knew his boss's name from years of hearing about office drama. If Tripp wanted to play hardball, I could play too. I sent a carefully worded email to his HR department explaining that I was concerned about my ex-partner's increasingly erratic behavior. I mentioned his controlling tendencies, how he tried to isolate me from friends, and how his recent actions suggested someone who might not be stable in a professional environment. I didn't lie about anything. I just presented the facts in a way that showed the pattern of behavior I'd been dealing with. Companies take workplace safety seriously, and they needed to know what kind of person they were employing. But Tripp was apparently more connected at his job than I'd realized. A few days later, Reed told me he'd heard through the grapevine that the email had backfired spectacularly. Tripp's boss had defended him completely, saying the email seemed like retaliation from a disgruntled ex. They'd documented it as a malicious complaint and moved on. The failure stung, but I wasn't done yet. Late one night, when I knew he'd be asleep, I went back to the apartment. I still had my old key, and I figured maybe the locksmith had only changed the main lock, not the deadbolt. It was worth a try. I needed my things, and he was being completely unreasonable about letting me get them. The key didn't work, but I stood there, for a few minutes anyway, thinking about everything that had happened. 4 years of my life, and this is how it ended. Locked out of my own home by someone who claimed to love me. What I didn't know was that Tripp had installed security cameras. A week later, everything fell apart at once. I got a call from my dad, which was weird, because we usually just texted. His voice sounded strained when he asked me to explain why Tripp was offering to return the $5,000 they'd contributed to the car purchase. My stomach dropped. My parents didn't know about the breakup yet. I'd been planning to tell them once I figured out how to spin it in a way that didn't make me look bad. They loved Tripp had always thought he was perfect for me, and I knew they'd take his side if they heard his version first. "What are you talking about?" I stalled. "He says you two ended your relationship and he doesn't feel right keeping our money. But you told us you were just having a small disagreement." I tried to explain, but Dad wanted to conference call with Mom, and then they wanted to talk to Tripp directly. Before I knew it, I was on speakerphone, listening to my own lies unravel in real time. "We need to understand what's going on," Mom said, and I could hear the disappointment already creeping into her voice. "Tripp is offering to pay us back money we gave to both of you, and you're saying you just needed space." "It's complicated." I started, but Dad cut me off. "He says he has video of you trying to break into his apartment. Is that true?" The question hung in the air like a bomb. I felt trapped, cornered by their sudden inquisition. I wasn't breaking in. I was trying to get my things. At 11 p.m., without calling first, everything spiraled from there. They wanted to see the video, wanted to hear Tripp's side, wanted explanations I couldn't give without revealing how much I'd been lying to them. By the end of the call, they were demanding I come over immediately to discuss what they called my pattern of deception. The confrontation at their house was brutal. They'd already talked to Tripp by then, had heard his calm, rational explanation of everything that had happened. When they asked about Reed, I tried to downplay it, but they saw right through me. "So you were having an emotional affair," Mom said flatly. "It wasn't an affair, we're just friends." Friends don't usually cause 4-year relationships to end, Piper. They were taking his side, just like I'd feared. Everything I said sounded defensive and childish compared to whatever story Tripp had told them. When they announced they were cutting off the financial support they'd been giving me and that I needed to pay them back the car money myself, I felt like the ground was disappearing beneath my feet. You're choosing him over your own daughter?" I asked, incredulous. "We're choosing accountability over enabling," Dad replied. "And right now you're not showing any." The worst part was having to arrange movers to get my stuff while Trip watched from across the parking lot. He didn't say a word, didn't try to help or make the process easier. Just stood there like a stranger while professional movers loaded my entire life into boxes. Reed, who'd been so supportive through everything, started pulling back around the same time. Without Trip's financial stability in my life, I was suddenly a lot less attractive as a prospect. The fancy dinners stopped, the long conversations about our future together became vague mentions of taking things slow. Within a month, he was making excuses about why he couldn't see me, why he was too busy with work to grab lunch. I'd lost everything: my relationship, my home, my family's support, and the man I thought I was leaving Trip for, all because I'd asked for something completely reasonable space to grow as a person. 8 months later, I'm still trying to rebuild. Living in a cramped studio apartment, working overtime to afford basic expenses, watching from the sidelines as Trip apparently moves on with his life, like our 4 years together meant nothing. I saw them at a coffee shop last weekend, him and his new girlfriend. She was laughing at something he said, looking at him like he hung the moon. They seemed comfortable together, natural, in a way that made my chest tight with something I didn't want to name. The truth is, I did what I thought was best for both of us. I gave him the chance to find someone who could appreciate his need for control, his methodical approach to everything, his complete inability to understand that sometimes people need freedom to explore who they're becoming. Maybe I should have handled things differently, been more direct about what I was feeling instead of trying to preserve his feelings. But I was 29 years old in my prime, and I deserved to know what else was out there before settling down forever. That's not selfish. That's human. Reed was right about one thing. Trip never really understood me. A man who truly loved me would have fought harder when I said I needed space. He would have asked what he could do to make things better instead of immediately cutting me off like I was some kind of threat to his precious routine. I'm not the villain in this story, no matter how everyone wants to paint it. I was a woman who recognized she was outgrowing her relationship and tried to handle it maturely. The fact that it blew up in my face doesn't make me wrong. It just makes me unlucky. But watching him with her, seeing how easily he replaced 4 years of history, I can't help wondering if maybe I miscalculated somewhere along the way. Not about needing space. I still believe that was right, but maybe about thinking he'd wait around while I figured out what I wanted. The thing is, I'm still figuring it out. And now I have to do it alone, in a studio apartment that smells like the previous tenant's cat working jobs that barely cover my bills, while he gets to play house with someone new. That's the part that really gets me. How quickly he moved on, like I was just a placeholder, until something better came along. 4 years, and I was that forgettable. But I'm not bitter about it. I'm just disappointed in how it all played out. And maybe, if I'm being completely real with myself, a little jealous that he found his happy ending so easily, while I'm still trying to figure out what mine looks like.